Her stepmother forced her adopted daughter to marry a homeless man from the street. She thought she was sending that girl into misery, but she never imagined that the man in those torn clothes was the real heir to one of the richest and most powerful families in America. This happened in a small town outside Savannah, Georgia. Mara and her husband Richard looked like the perfect couple. He owned several hardware stores. She smiled at church every Sunday, but they couldn't have children. So they adopted a little girl from foster care. Her name was Grace. For a short time, Grace thought she finally had a family. Then Mara got pregnant. She gave birth to twin girls, Avery and Madison. And from that day on, Grace's life changed. Mara stopped treating her like a daughter. She became the girl who cooked, the girl who cleaned, the girl who carried everyone's bags. She was not allowed to eat at the table. She ate leftovers in the laundry room. The twins called her the Charity Kid. And Mara never stopped them. She only said, "Don't forget your place." The only person who protected Grace was Richard. He always said, "She is my daughter too." But when Grace was 9, Richard died suddenly. After the funeral, Mara stopped pretending. She gave Grace's room to the twins, then moved Grace into a storage room near the garage. From that day on, Grace woke up before sunrise. She made breakfast, scrubbed floors, washed clothes, and stayed quiet no matter how badly they treated her. Years passed. Grace turned 22, but nothing changed. She kept telling herself, "If I just work harder, maybe one day they'll love me." But Mara never planned to love her. She only wanted Grace to stay beneath her real daughters. So every time a decent man showed interest in Grace, Mara ruined it. She told one man Grace was unstable. She told another Grace had nothing to offer. She even said, "Be careful, she's not really family." Then, one afternoon, Grace went to the farmer's market. She was carrying heavy grocery bags when a man in a navy coat stopped and looked at her. His name was Ethan Caldwell. He had just returned from New York. His family owned hotels, restaurants, and half the property downtown. He saw Grace help an old woman pick up spilled apples. Then he saw Mara shout from across the street, "Grace, hurry up, you're embarrassing me." Grace lowered her head and apologized. Ethan followed her. Grace turned around and asked, "Why are you following me?" Ethan said, "Because everyone treats you like you're invisible." "But you don't look invisible to me." Grace froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Then Ethan said, "I want to see you again." By the time Grace got home, Ethan was already at the front gate. Mara heard his voice and came outside. The second she saw his expensive coat and watch, her face changed. She smiled, then pushed Avery and Madison forward. "These are my daughters," she said. "Both single, both raised properly." But Ethan looked past them. He pointed at Grace. "I came for her." The porch went silent. Mara's smile disappeared. Then she laughed and said, "Oh, Grace? She's already engaged." Grace looked up in shock. Mara kept going. "She's getting married next Sunday." Grace tried to speak, but Mara grabbed her wrist so hard she went quiet. Ethan stared at Grace. Then he looked back at Mara and said, "If Grace is getting married next Sunday, then I'll marry one of your daughters." Mara answered immediately, "Of course." Avery and Madison almost screamed with excitement. But that night, Mara realized the problem. Grace had no fiancé. There was no wedding. And if Ethan found out, the lie would collapse. So Mara made a decision. Grace had to get married before Sunday. To anyone. The next morning, Mara sent a handyman to the old gas station outside town. People said a man had been sleeping behind it. No car, no job, no family. Mara said, "Bring him here." A man like that won't say no to a wife. That afternoon, the handyman came back with him. The man stood on the porch in dirty jeans and a torn army jacket. His boots were covered in mud. His face looked tired. To Mara, he looked worthless. She looked him up and down and asked, "What's your name?" He answered calmly, "Caleb." Mara didn't even invite him inside. She just said, "Will you marry my adopted daughter?" Caleb looked past her. Grace was standing in the doorway, quiet, ashamed, trapped. His expression changed. Then he asked, "Does she want this?" Mara laughed. "She doesn't get to want things." Grace lowered her head. She knew saying no would only make it worse, so she whispered, "I'll do it." That Sunday, 2 weddings happened in the same church. Avery married Ethan Caldwell in front of flowers, cameras, and half the town. Grace married Caleb in a plain white dress from a donation box. No flowers, no guests, no applause. After the ceremony, Mara hugged Avery. Then she turned to Grace and said, "Now leave, and don't come back." Grace left with Caleb in an old pickup truck. They drove to a tiny rental house at the edge of town. The roof leaked. There was 1 mattress, 1 broken table, almost nothing else. But Grace didn't complain. She cleaned, cooked, washed the windows, and turned that empty little house into the first peaceful place she had ever known. Caleb watched her every day. He saw how tired she was, how kind she stayed, how little she asked for. And Grace noticed things too. Caleb looked poor, but he didn't speak like a poor man. He read legal documents at night. He knew things no homeless man should know. And whenever someone insulted Grace, 1 cold look from him shut them up. For the first time in years, Grace felt safe. 3 months later, Caleb came home wearing a clean black suit. Grace froze. He placed a black leather folder on the kitchen table. On the front was a gold seal. Whitmore Holdings, one of the richest family names in America. Grace stopped breathing. Caleb looked at her and said, "Grace, sit down. There's something I should have told you before we got married." He opened the folder. The first document inside had a name on it. Not Caleb, another name. A name Grace had heard on the news. A name tied to hotels, banks, private jets, and billions of dollars. Then Caleb said, "My real name isn't Caleb." So who was the man Mara forced Grace to marry? And why had he been hiding behind that gas station? If you want part 2, comment part 2.